Imagine a life, not just lived, but taken. Not by death, but by an idea. An idea so powerful, it could steal 27 years from a man, yet fail to break his spirit. Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving deep into a story that's more than just history. It's a profound lesson in the human condition, in resilience, and in the very nature of power and resistance. We're going to explore the incredible journey of Nelson Mandela, a man whose name has become synonymous with freedom, justice, and an absolutely unyielding spirit. But we're not just recounting events. We're going to unpack the theories that underpin his struggle, the forces at play, and the profound impact of his approach. What if I told you that the very system designed to crush him inadvertently forged the icon he became? That the brutal machinery of apartheid, intended to enforce segregation and dominance, ultimately provided the crucible for a new form of resistance, one rooted in dignity, negotiation, and an unwavering commitment to a truly inclusive society? We'll see how the very architecture of oppression, a complex web of legal, social, and psychological control, became the foundation upon which the seeds of liberation were sown, not through violence, but through an extraordinary act of will and strategic patience. The theoretical landscape of apartheid and resistance. Let's begin by understanding the theoretical underpinnings of apartheid itself. It wasn't merely racial discrimination. It was a highly sophisticated state-sponsored system of racial segregation and white minority rule in South Africa, enforced from 1948 to 1994. Social stratification theories. Apartheid can be analyzed through the lens of various social stratification theories. It was a rigid caste system, where an individual's social status, rights, and opportunities were determined solely by their assigned racial group at birth. This aligns with conflict theory, specifically the Marxist interpretation, where the ruling white minority bourgeoisie maintained economic and political power by exploiting and oppressing the black majority, proletariat. The system created an inherent power imbalance, where access to resources, education, healthcare, and land was deliberately skewed. State control and hegemony. We see a clear application of state theory here, where the state apparatus, government, police, military, judiciary, was meticulously designed to enforce apartheid laws. This wasn't just about physical control, it was also about hegemony, a concept theorized by Antonio Gramsci. The National Party sought to establish a dominant ideology that naturalized racial inequality, making it seem normal or just to the white population, thereby securing consent for their rule. This involved control over education, media, and public discourse to shape perceptions and maintain their moral and intellectual leadership. Theories of identity and othering. Apartheid fundamentally relied on the creation of distinct racial identities and the process of othering. By classifying people into rigid racial categories, white, black, colored, Indian, the regime systematically dehumanized the black majority, justifying their subjugation. This aligns with theories of social construction of race, demonstrating that race is not a biological reality but a social construct used to establish hierarchies and power dynamics. The other was stripped of agency and rights, creating a psychological distance that facilitated exploitation. Legal and economic mechanisms of control. Delving deeper into the theoretical underpinnings, apartheid utilized specific legal and economic mechanisms to solidify its control. Legal positivism versus natural law. The apartheid state operated under a strict form of legal positivism, where law was simply what the state declared it to be, regardless of its moral content. Laws like the Population Registration Act, Group Areas Act, and pass laws were examples of this. They stood in stark contrast to natural law theory, which posits that there are universal moral principles that transcend human-made laws. Mandela and the ANC's arguments for equality and human dignity were rooted in natural law, challenging the legitimacy of apartheid's legal framework. Economic exploitation and dependency theory. Apartheid was fundamentally an economic system designed to provide cheap black labor for white-owned industries and farms. This aligns with aspects of dependency theory, where the economic development of the dominant group is predicated on the underdevelopment and exploitation of the subordinate group. The Bantustan system, for instance, created economically unviable homeland for black Africans, forcing them to seek work in white areas as migrant laborers. thus maintaining a ready supply of exploitable labor. Early resistance. Theories of social movements. Against this backdrop of systematic oppression, resistance movements began to emerge, each with its own theoretical approach to challenging the status quo. Resource mobilization theory. Early resistance movements, like the African National Congress (ANC), founded in 1912, illustrate resource mobilization theory. They sought to gather resources, financial, human members, and organizational, to collectively challenge the existing power structure. Initially, their approach was largely nonviolent, focusing on petitions, protests, and legal challenges. Relative deprivation theory. The growing frustration and desire for change can also be explained by relative deprivation theory. While not necessarily in absolute poverty, Black South Africans experienced a significant gap between their expectations of rights and opportunities and the reality of their lives under apartheid. This gap fueled a sense of injustice and motivated collective action. Nonviolent resistance. Gandhian principles influenced by Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy. Early ANC campaigns, such as the Defiance Campaign of 1952, adopted principles of nonviolent civil disobedience. This theory posits that by deliberately but peacefully violating unjust laws, resistors can expose the moral bankruptcy of the oppressor, disrupt the system, and provoke a crisis that forces a response. The goal is to appeal to the conscience of the oppressors and the international community. The turn to armed struggle, just war theory and strategic considerations. The Sharpeville massacre in 1960, where police opened fire on peaceful protesters, marked a pivotal moment, leading the ANC to abandon its exclusive commitment to nonviolence. This shift brings us to a discussion of just war theory and strategic considerations. Jus ad bellum, right to go to war. The decision to form Umkhonto we Sizwe MK, the ANC's armed wing, can be analyzed through the lens of jus ad bellum. Proponents argued that they had exhausted all peaceful means, faced an oppressive regime that used violence against its own citizens, and that armed struggle was a last resort for self-defense and the liberation of the oppressed. The goal was not to initiate a full-scale war but to engage in sabotage to disrupt the apartheid infrastructure and pressure the regime. Strategic nonviolence versus armed struggle. This period highlights the ongoing debate within social movements regarding the efficacy of different forms of resistance. While nonviolent resistance aims to win over the oppressor or public opinion through moral persuasion, armed struggle seeks to impose costs on the oppressor, weaken their capacity, and force them to negotiate. Mandela himself, though initially advocating nonviolence, came to believe that armed struggle was a necessary, albeit undesirable, component of their overall strategy, particularly given the state's brutal repression of peaceful protest. Nelson Mandela's imprisonment and the evolution of resistance. The Rivonia trial and the theory of political trials. Mandela's arrest and the subsequent Rivonia trial, 1963 to 1964, were not merely legal proceedings. They were highly politicized events designed to delegitimize the anti-apartheid movement and its leaders. Political trials as state power displays. Political trials, in theory, serve multiple functions for the state: to isolate dissidents, deter others from resistance, and legitimize the state's actions through a veneer of legality. The Rivonia trial aimed to paint Mandela and his comrades as terrorists, undermining their moral standing. The courtroom as a platform. However, for the accused, political trials can also be transformed into a platform for resistance. Mandela's "I am prepared to die" speech was a masterful example of this. It was a powerful articulation of his ideals, a refutation of the state's narrative, and an appeal to a global audience. This aligns with theories of symbolic politics, where the courtroom becomes a stage for performing ideological conflict and mobilizing support. Imprisonment and the theory of Panopticism and resilience. Mandela's 27 years in prison, particularly on Robben Island, provide a rich case study for theories of incarceration, control, and human resilience. Foucault's Panopticism. The design and operation of Robben Island Prison can be analyzed through Michel Foucault's concept of panopticism. The system was designed to create a sense of constant surveillance, even when guards weren't present, leading prisoners to internalize disciplinary norms and self-regulate their behavior. The strict rules, isolation, and denial of information were all part of this disciplinary power. Resistance within incarceration. Despite the oppressive environment, prisoners on Robben Island developed sophisticated forms of resistance. This includes cognitive dissonance reduction. Prisoners maintained their ideological commitment by rejecting the legitimacy of their captors, reducing cognitive dissonance between their beliefs and their circumstances. Social cohesion and collective identity. Despite attempts to divide them, prisoners formed strong bonds, creating a collective identity and mutual support networks. This demonstrates the power of group cohesion in resisting atomization and demoralization. Intellectual resistance. Prisoners engaged in secret study groups, debated political theory, and educated each other. This intellectual activity was a profound act of resistance, maintaining their mental faculties and their commitment to liberation, even without external resources. This highlights the importance of knowledge as power even in the most restricted environments. The power of symbolic resistance. Even small acts of defiance, like refusing to wear short pants or demanding access to newspapers, became highly significant acts of symbolic resistance, affirming their dignity and agency. External pressure and international relations theories. While Mandela was imprisoned, the anti-apartheid movement continued externally, applying pressure through various international relations theories. Sanctions as a tool of coercion. The international community, particularly through the United Nations, implemented economic sanctions against South Africa. This is a classic example of coercive diplomacy in international relations. The theory behind sanctions is that by imposing economic costs, they can compel a state to change its policies. While their direct impact is debated, they certainly contributed to the regime's economic isolation and political delegitimization. Transnational advocacy networks. Anti-apartheid movements abroad formed powerful transnational advocacy networks, TANs, linking NGOs, human rights organizations, and sympathetic governments. These networks leveraged public opinion, shared information, and coordinated campaigns to put pressure on their own governments and international bodies. This illustrates the growing influence of non-state actors in international politics. Moral suasion and norm diffusion. The global anti-apartheid movement also employed moral suasion, appealing to universal human rights principles and challenging the legitimacy of apartheid on ethical grounds. This contributed to the diffusion of international norms against racial discrimination, gradually isolating South Africa on the world stage. The divestment movement, for example, was a powerful demonstration of this moral pressure influencing financial decisions. Negotiation, transition, and the legacy of reconciliation. The theory of negotiation and power transitions. Mandela's release in 1990 and the subsequent negotiations with the apartheid government were a complex process that can be analyzed through various theories of negotiation and power transitions. Ripeness theory. The timing of negotiations is often explained by ripeness theory. Both sides must perceive that a continued stalemate is more costly than engaging in negotiations, and that there is a mutually hurting stalemate, MHS. For the apartheid regime, sanctions, internal unrest, and the end of the Cold War, which removed their anti-communist justification, created an MHS. For the ANC, the recognition of the need for a negotiated settlement to avoid further bloodshed and a prolonged struggle was also key. Bargaining theory and strategic concessions. The negotiations involved intricate bargaining theory, with both sides making strategic concessions to achieve their core objectives. The ANC, while committed to universal suffrage, had to make concessions on issues like economic restructuring to ensure a peaceful transition. The National Party, on the other hand, had to concede on white minority rule but sought guarantees for the white population. Elite pacts and democratic transition theory. The transition from apartheid to democracy is a classic case study in democratic transition theory, particularly the idea of elite pacts. A crucial aspect was the willingness of key elites from both sides, Mandela, de Klerk and others, to engage in dialogue, build trust, and forge a shared vision for the future, despite deep historical divisions. This involved significant risk-taking and a commitment to a shared democratic outcome. reconciliation, and the theory of transitional justice. One of the most remarkable aspects of South Africa's transition was the emphasis on reconciliation, particularly through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC. This brings us to the theories of transitional justice. Restorative justice versus retributive justice. The TRC was a groundbreaking experiment in restorative justice, a departure from traditional retributive justice which focuses solely on punishment. Restorative justice seeks to repair harm, promote healing, and reintegrate offenders into society by focusing on truth-telling, accountability, and reconciliation. Victims were given a platform to tell their stories, and perpetrators could apply for amnesty in exchange for full disclosure of their politically motivated crimes. Theories of forgiveness and social healing. The TRC aimed to foster social healing and forgiveness at a national level. While not everyone achieved personal forgiveness, the process aimed to establish a common historical record and provide a degree of closure. This aligns with theories that emphasize the psychological and sociological benefits of acknowledging past wrongs as a prerequisite for moving forward as a society. Memory and narrative construction. The TRC also played a critical role in the construction of national memory and narrative. By collecting countless testimonies, it created a comprehensive archive of apartheid's atrocities, ensuring that the past would not be forgotten or denied. This is crucial for preventing future human rights abuses and for building a shared understanding of history. Mandela's leadership, charisma, and transformational leadership. Nelson Mandela's personal leadership was undeniably central to this entire process. His leadership can be analyzed through the lenses of charisma and transformational leadership. Charismatic leadership. Max Weber's theory of charismatic leadership is highly applicable. Mandela possessed an extraordinary personal magnetism and an ability to inspire devotion and trust in his followers, transcending racial and political divides. His moral authority, forged through years of suffering and unwavering commitment, gave him immense influence.
Transformational leadership. Mandela exemplified transformational leadership.
He didn't just manage the existing system, he fundamentally changed it. He articulated a compelling vision for a non-racial democratic South Africa, inspired his followers to achieve that vision, and empowered them to act. He fostered intellectual stimulation by encouraging critical thinking and challenging assumptions, and he showed individual consideration, valuing and respecting each person's contribution. His focus on reconciliation, rather than retribution, after decades of oppression, is a hallmark of transformational leadership. The power of symbolism and moral authority. Mandela understood the immense power of symbolism. His iconic status, his dignified bearing, and his commitment to principles even during his darkest hours, resonated deeply with people worldwide. He became a symbol of hope and resistance, lending immense moral authority to the anti-apartheid cause and later, to the project of nation-building. The continuing relevance and challenges. Challenges post-apartheid and development theories. While apartheid was dismantled, its legacy continues to pose significant challenges, illustrating ongoing debates in development theories. Persistent inequality and development economics. Despite political freedom, deep-seated economic inequalities persist in South Africa. This highlights the complexities of development economics, where dismantling discriminatory laws does not automatically erase decades of systemic disadvantage. Issues like land distribution, access to quality education, and employment opportunities remain critical. This relates to structural inequality theory, which argues that even after formal equality is achieved, systemic structures can perpetuate disparities. Nation-building and identity politics. The task of nation-building in a post-conflict society is immense. South Africa grapples with ongoing issues of identity politics, tribalism, and social cohesion. Mandela's vision of a rainbow nation was a theoretical aspiration, and the practical implementation requires ongoing effort to bridge historical divides and forge a common national identity, rather than reverting to fragmented group loyalties. The challenges of democracy in emerging nations. South Africa's democratic journey, while a success story in many ways, also highlights the ongoing challenges faced by emerging democracies. Corruption, institutional capacity, and the management of diverse interests. These are common themes in political development theory, which examines how nations build stable and effective democratic institutions. Mandela's enduring legacy, applications of his theories. Nelson Mandela's legacy extends far beyond South Africa, offering profound theoretical insights applicable globally. The universality of human rights. His struggle reaffirmed the universality of human rights and the moral imperative to challenge oppression wherever it exists. He demonstrated that even in the face of immense state power, the pursuit of human dignity and equality is a powerful and ultimately achievable goal. This reinforces the theoretical foundations of international human rights law. The power of forgiveness and reconciliation. Mandela's commitment to reconciliation, even with his former oppressors, offers a powerful model for conflict resolution and post-conflict societies. This challenges purely retributive approaches to justice and emphasizes the potential for long-term peace through processes of healing and mutual understanding. This contributes to theories of peace-building and conflict transformation. Strategic patience and long-term vision. Mandela's journey teaches us the importance of strategic patience and a long-term vision in social and political change. His unwavering commitment over decades, adapting his tactics while never losing sight of his ultimate goal, is a testament to the power of sustained effort in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. This highlights the theoretical concept of historical agency, the ability of individuals to shape historical outcomes. Leadership in adversity. His life provides an enduring theoretical framework for leadership in adversity. It emphasizes moral courage, the ability to inspire hope, and the willingness to make difficult choices for the greater good. It's a reminder that true leadership isn't about power for its own sake, but about serving a higher purpose and empowering others. The unbreakable spirit, a theoretical conclusion. So what is the unbreakable spirit we set out to explore? Theoretically, it is the embodiment of several core concepts. Resilience theory. It is the human capacity for resilience, the ability to bounce back from profound adversity, adapt, and even grow stronger in the face of trauma and oppression. Mandela's journey is the ultimate empirical example of this. Agency versus structure. It's the triumph of human agency over oppressive social and political structures. While apartheid was a formidable structure designed to control every aspect of life, Mandela and the movement demonstrated that human will, collective action, and strategic ingenuity can ultimately dismantle even the most entrenched systems. The power of ideas. At its core, it is the enduring power of ideas, the idea of freedom, equality, and justice, to motivate, mobilize, and ultimately transform societies. Mandela himself was a living embodiment of these ideas. Nelson Mandela's fight wasn't just his fight, it was a testament to the enduring human capacity to strive for a more just world. He didn't just endure 27 years, he transformed the captivity into a platform, a symbol, and ultimately, a catalyst for fundamental change. His story isn't just history, it's a living theory of how radical change can be achieved, not just through confrontation, but through the profound and strategic application of principle, patience, and an unwavering belief in the shared humanity of all people.